The rain was pounding relentlessly against the glass of the diner off Route 66, just outside Flagstaff, Arizona. It was 2:15 a.m., and the neon sign hummed a buzz that vibrated right through my teeth. I sat in a red vinyl booth, nursing a cup of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. Across from me sat my 30-year-old son, David, and his fiancée, Jessica. But they weren't looking at me like family. They were looking at me like an obstacle standing between them and $250,000. "You don't understand the position you're putting us in, Evelyn," David whispered, his voice dangerously low, cutting through the low rumble of thunder outside. His knuckles were white as he gripped the edge of the Formica table. "It's your duty to pay for this wedding." "You owe me this." "Duty?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, yet lethal enough to make the waitress pause 3 tables over. "I gave you 30 years of my life, David. I buried your father in the frozen dirt of Bangor, Maine, when you were 7 years old. I worked 3 jobs from Boston to Chicago just to make sure you never knew what hunger felt like. And now you sit across from me in the middle of the Arizona desert and talk to me about duty." Jessica leaned forward, her silver bracelets clinking together like tiny handcuffs. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, completely devoid of warmth. "Let's cut the tragic mother act, Evelyn. We know about the account. We know about the wire transfer from the probate court in Denver. $250,000. It hits your account in 48 hours. David is your only child. If you don't sign over the authorization forms tonight, we don't just leave your life. We make sure you regret ever coming out here." A smirk played on David's lips, a twisted, entitled expression I had never seen on his face before. He leaned back, crossing his arms, waiting for me to break. He thought he knew me. He thought the quiet woman who raised him in the foggy shadows of New England was weak. He thought my maternal love was an exploit, a soft vulnerability he could squeeze until the cash flowed out. He had no idea what I had done to earn that money. He had no idea what kind of monster he was actually poking. I didn't cry. I didn't tremble. In the dark, locked vaults of my chest, something vital snapped shut with the weight of a vault door. The mother who had protected David for 3 decades died right there, in that flickering neon diner. In her place stood Evelyn Tales, a woman who had spent 25 years as a high-level forensic auditor for federal asset forfeiture, tracking blood money from Miami to Seattle. I stood up slowly. The screech of my chair against the linoleum was like a siren. Jessica finally dropped her icy composure, her eyes darting nervously around the room. I looked down at my son, staring straight into his hollow eyes. My voice was stripped of every ounce of warmth, dropping to a tone that could freeze boiling water. "You have 24 hours to get out of my sight, David. If I see your face or hear your voice after tomorrow night, I won't just disown you. I will dismantle everything you think you own." David's smirk vanished, his jaw dropped, panic flashing across his eyes. "What?" "Evelyn, Mom, what are you talking about?" "You had a choice," I said, stepping past the booth into the cold desert night air. "You made it. Now live with it." I pushed through the diner doors into the torrents of the Arizona storm, stepping directly into a high-stakes chess game that had actually begun 8 months ago in a quiet suburb of Seattle, Washington. 8 months earlier, my life had been predictable. I was living in a quiet, 2-story house nestled in the rainy hills of Bellevue, just outside Seattle. Ever since my husband died in Maine, I had built a fortress of solitary peace. I worked remotely as a private financial investigator, digging through shell companies and tracking hidden paper trails across state lines. Then came a storm-drenched Tuesday evening. David and Jessica knocked on my front door, carrying wet suitcases and pleading eyes. "Just 3 months, Mom," David had begged in my entry hallway, shaking the rain off his jacket. Jessica's job transferred her to Seattle, and my sales commission is tied up until winter. We just need a place to stay while we save for a down payment on a house and a modest wedding. You've got 4 bedrooms sitting empty. Against every instinct honed by decades of dealing with deceptive people, my heart softened. He was my son. I opened my home to them. Within 7 days, the temporary arrangement felt like a hostile takeover. I came home from a client meeting in downtown Seattle one afternoon to find my entire living room gutted and rearranged. My vintage walnut armchair, the chair my late husband had bought me in Portland during our honeymoon, had been dragged out of the room and shoved into a damp corner of the dark basement. In its place stood an absurd, industrial-grade leather massage chair that belonged to Jessica. When I confronted her, Jessica didn't even look up from her laptop on my kitchen island. "Oh, Evelyn," she said, tapping her acrylic nails against her glass. "The energy in that room was completely suffocating. This open layout works so much better for our evening work calls." "Don't worry, you'll get used to it." She didn't ask, she took. I didn't yell, I didn't scream. That was for amateurs. Instead, I walked down into the damp basement, wrapped my fingers around the frame of her $1,200 massage chair, and dragged it up the stairs, leaving deep rubber scuffs along the hallway floor. I pushed it into the center of their bedroom, then carried my husband's walnut chair back to its sacred spot by the bay window. When Jessica walked out of the kitchen and saw what I had done, her cheeks turned blotchy and red. "What is wrong with you?" she hissed. "That chair was placed there for my spinal recovery. This is my house," I replied smoothly, wiping a speck of dust from the armrest. "You are guests in a space paid for by 30 years of my sweat. Touch my furniture again, and your belongings will meet the same fate on the front lawn." David had tried to step between us, wringing his hands like a nervous teenage boy. "Mom, come on, don't be like that. We're just trying to make this feel like home." "It is my home, David," I said, looking right through his desperate facade. "And you are quickly overstaying your welcome." They retreated to their room, whispering angrily behind locked doors. I sat in my husband's chair, listening to the rain fall against the Bellevue window, realizing with chilling clarity that I hadn't let my son move in. I had invited a pair of financial parasites across my threshold. By month 3, the parasitic behavior turned into systemic theft. My weekly grocery budget jumped from $100 to over $400. Fresh Pacific salmon, organic produce, imported olive oil from San Francisco. It vanished from the refrigerator within hours of being unpacked. One afternoon, after returning from a grueling 8-hour audit call, I opened the fridge expecting my prepped salmon salads. The shelves were completely bare, except for a jar of yellow mustard and a half-empty carton of almond milk. In the living room, Jessica was lounging on my sofa, eating the last bowl of my organic blueberries while scrolling through her phone. "Jessica, those meal containers were my dinners for the week," I said, my voice dangerously even. She shrugged without breaking eye contact with her screen. "David got hungry after his workout." "Besides, Evelyn, you have plenty of money. We're saving every penny for our big day in Colorado." They were saving their pennies by bleeding me dry. The next morning, I drove down to a commercial hardware warehouse in Tacoma. I purchased a heavy-duty steel mini-fridge equipped with a digital keypad deadbolt. I had it bolted to the floorboards inside my master closet. I loaded it with my food, my coffee, and my medicines. In the main kitchen fridge, I left precisely 3 items: a loaf of cheap white bread, a gallon of tap water, and a single carton of eggs. 2 days later, David banged on my bedroom door, his face flushed with frustration. "Mom, what is this? There's literally nothing to eat in the entire house." Jessica wanted a Mediterranean salad. I adjusted my reading glasses and turned a page of my file. "The supermarket in Bellevue is 4 miles down the highway. They are open until midnight. But you always do the grocery shopping on Thursdays," he bellowed, sounding like a spoiled 9-year-old. "I bought exactly what I need for myself," I said flatly. "You are 30 years old, David. If you and Jessica want fine dining, use your own credit cards." He stormed off, cursing down the hallway, but the real nightmare hadn't even begun. They weren't just after free groceries. They were hunting bigger game. It was a crisp Thursday morning in late autumn when the telephone call came that changed everything. "Hello, Evelyn Tales," a bubbly voice chirped through the receiver. "Speaking." "Hi, Evelyn. This is Chloe from the Red Rock Estate Manor in Aspen, Colorado. I'm calling to finalize the $45,000 deposit for David and Jessica's winter wedding reception. Jessica gave us your social security number and personal banking routing details to clear the wire today. My blood ran cold. The ambient noise of my quiet Bellevue home vanished, replaced by the sharp, metallic ringing in my ears. I glanced down the corridor. Jessica was sitting on the patio, sipping herbal tea, casually watching me through the sliding glass door with a smug, expectant look on her face. They had stolen my tax records from my private home office. "Chloe," I said, ensuring my tone was crystal clear and carried right through the patio glass. "There has been a catastrophic miscommunication. I have not authorized any payment. I do not endorse this event. If you attempt to process a wire using those bank details, I will file an immediate federal identity theft report with the FBI against both the applicant and your venue." The coordinator on the other end gasped. Oh my goodness. I am so sorry, ma'am," I hung up. Across the yard, Jessica's smile disintegrated. She slammed her teacup down and marched into the kitchen, her eyes wild with fury. "What did you just do?" "You just humiliated me in front of one of the most exclusive venues in Colorado. You attempted to commit wire fraud using my identity, Jessica," I said, standing up to my full height. "You didn't just humiliate yourself, you came within an inch of a felony indictment. David told me you were paying for the venue," she shrieked. "He said you had a trust fund from his father's estate in Boston." "David lied," I replied, my voice dropping to a terrifying hush. "My late husband left his estate to me. Not to a son who couldn't be bothered to visit his grave. And certainly not to a woman who steals bank records out of my filing cabinet." She slammed her fist against the granite counter and stormed into their room. When David came home from his job that evening, the shouting match between them shook the light fixtures. I sat on my back porch, watching the fog roll off Lake Washington, calmly executing phase 2 of my response. I didn't wait for them to apologize. I picked up my phone and began severing every financial artery connecting David to my life. For 12 years, David had remained on my mobile family account. With 4 clicks on my laptop, I split the account, paid off his device balance, and initiated a 48-hour service termination protocol. Next, I dialed my insurance agent in Hartford, Connecticut. David's luxury sedan was registered under my multi-vehicle umbrella policy. I removed his coverage effective at midnight. Finally, I drove to my local bank branch in downtown Seattle. Years ago, I had issued David an emergency credit card for unexpected car repairs. Upon pulling his transaction history, I discovered thousands of dollars in subtle, parasitic charges over the last 6 months. High-end dinners in Vancouver, designer clothes, spa packages in Portland. I canceled the card, flagged the unauthorized transactions, and converted all my personal accounts to require dual-factor biometric authorization. When David walked into the kitchen that evening, he was shaking with rage, holding his phone out like a weapon. "My phone service just got flagged for shutdown," he screamed, his voice cracking. "And my auto insurance app says my policy is canceled. What are you doing to me?" I calmly sliced vegetables on my cutting board. "You are 30 years old, David. It is time you pay for your own life. We are trying to fund a wedding. Then lower your expectations," I replied without missing a stroke of the chef's knife. "My financial sponsorship of your life ended the moment you breached my private files. Dinner is for one tonight. You can find a fast food drive-through down the road." That cold severance set the fuse for the final explosion. 2 nights later, they demanded a family conference in my dining room. Jessica produced a leather-bound binder thick with vendor contracts, catering menus from Napa Valley, and photography estimates from Lowe's Angels. "The total budget for the wedding we deserve is $95,000, Jessica declared, her tone cold and transactional. "Since we have endured staying in this out-of-the-way house, we expect you to cover $70,000 of it out of your Denver inheritance fund." I looked at my son. "Is this what you want, David?" David puffed out his chest, stepping into a role he was entirely unsuited for. "Yes, Mom. Everyone in Jessica's family has massive weddings funded by their parents." You're sitting on a fortune from Dad's real estate sales. It's my birthright. Your birthright, I whispered. Your father worked 80 hours a week in the shipyards of Portland to build that reserve so I wouldn't starve in a nursing home. You will not get a single dime. That was when David lost his mind. He slammed both palms onto the table, shattering a glass water goblet. It is your duty to pay for my wedding, he screamed, his face contorted into a grotesque mask of entitlement. If you won't give us the money, then get out of my life forever. He smirked, leaning back, fully expecting me to burst into tears and surrender. Instead, I gave him exactly what he asked for. You have 24 hours to vacate my property, I said. They didn't believe me. They thought I was bluffing. They packed a few bags and drove off to a hotel in Tacoma, convinced I would call them in the morning crying and apologizing. They had no idea that as soon as their taillights disappeared down the driveway, I initiated a total asset liquidation and security lockdown. I didn't just pack their things. I systematically cataloged every single item they owned into cardboard boxes, filmed the entire process to prevent false police reports, and stacked them neatly under the covered front porch. At 7:00 a.m., a commercial locksmith from Seattle arrived. We replaced every deadbolt on the exterior doors with high-security smart locks. I installed 4 motion-activated cameras around the perimeter, linked directly to the local police precinct's monitoring grid. When David and Jessica drove back up the driveway at 4:00 p.m., expecting a tearful reconciliation, they found their entire life packaged in cardboard on the porch. David sprinted to the door and shoved his key into the keyhole. It wouldn't even enter the lock. He pounded his fists against the oak door until his knuckles bled. Evelyn, open this damn door. You can't do this. It's illegal to lock us out. I walked up to the door, speaking through the security intercom. Your 24 hours expired at 3:00 p.m., David. You gave me an ultimatum, pay for your luxury or get out of your life. I chose option 2. I'll smash the windows, he screamed, completely unhinged. The windows are reinforced security glass, I replied calmly, and the local sheriff's department is already en route. You have 10 minutes to clear your boxes off my porch before you are arrested for criminal trespass. Jessica broke down crying hysterically on the porch steps, shouting at David for ruining everything. Half an hour later, a rented moving truck pulled up, and they loaded their boxes in humiliated silence under the watchful eye of 2 uniformed deputies. When the truck finally drove away into the gray Seattle rain, I locked the deadbolt. The sharp click echoed through the empty hallway. I thought that was the end of the nightmare. I was wrong. It was only the beginning of their desperation. Over the next 3 months, David and Jessica unraveled completely. Without my house as a free landing pad, and without my credit cards shielding them, the brutal realities of adult life hit them like a freight train. They moved into a cramped, overpriced 1-bedroom apartment in a rundown district of Oakland, California, where Jessica had managed to secure a low-level sales job. But their habits hadn't changed, only their income had. David began sending me desperate, rambling emails from public library computers. Mom, Jessica's parents refused to help us. We're $30,000 in credit card debt. Vendors are threatening to sue us for breach of contract. We need $50,000 now, or we're going to lose everything. I deleted every single message. I didn't reply. I didn't send a cent. Then came the dark turn. 6 months after I kicked them out, I received a notice from a law firm based in San Francisco. David and Jessica were attempting to sue me in probate court, claiming that my late husband's original will, from 20 years ago, had contained a hidden trust clause, granting David 50% of our liquid assets upon his 30th birthday. They were trying to use the legal system to rob me. What they didn't know was that I had kept every original legal document in a safe deposit box inside a vault in downtown Boston. Instead of hiring an attorney to fight a protracted legal battle, I decided to end this war personally. I packed a single suitcase, boarded a flight from Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, and flew straight across the country to Boston, Massachusetts. I retrieved the original, certified estate documents, stamped by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that my husband had left 100% of his estate to me, with zero trust provisions for David until after my death. Then, I flew from Boston to San Francisco for the preliminary probate hearing. The courtroom in downtown San Francisco was cold and formal. David and Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table, beside a cheap strip mall attorney they had clearly hired on contingency. When I walked in alone, carrying a worn leather briefcase, David refused to meet my eyes. Jessica sat with her arms crossed, glaring at me with pure hatred. The judge, a stern woman with sharp gray eyes, reviewed the petition. Plaintiff claims the defendant is withholding mandatory trust disbursements under the estate of Arthur Tales. Defendant, do you have legal representation? I represent myself, Your Honor, I stated, stepping forward with total composure. I opened my briefcase and laid the certified documents from Boston directly on the clerk's desk, along with a secondary file I had put together during my flight. Your Honor, I stated, my voice ringing clearly through the courtroom. The original estate decree from Suffolk County, Massachusetts, clearly shows no trust exists. Furthermore, I have submitted certified bank records proving that over the last 2 years, the plaintiffs have engaged in systemic unauthorized financial withdrawals, attempted identity theft in the state of Colorado, and fraudulent credit usage under my name totaling over $28,000. The judge's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the documents. She looked over her glasses at David's attorney. Counselor, did you verify these estate claims before filing this petition? The attorney's face drained of color. He looked down at David, then back at the judge. Your Honor, my clients assured me, this petition is dismissed with prejudice. The judge slammed her gavel down, the sound echoing like a gunshot. And I am referring these files regarding bank fraud and identity theft to the district attorney's office for immediate review. Jessica gasped, turning white as a sheet. David collapsed back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. I picked up my briefcase, turned my back on them, and walked out of the courtroom without saying a single word. That brings us back to that stormy night in Arizona. 2 months after the disaster in San Francisco, David had tracked me down. He had discovered through a distant relative that I was driving across the country, taking a long overdue road trip through the Southwest to clear my head. He and Jessica had followed my trail from Albuquerque, New Mexico, all the way to that diner near Flagstaff, Arizona. They were broke, facing potential criminal charges, and completely destitute. They thought that by confronting me in person in a remote diner in the middle of the night, they could emotionally corner me into writing a check to settle their debts and pay off the prosecutors. They had completely miscalculated who I was. When I stepped out of that diner into the Arizona rain, leaving David stammering in the booth, I didn't drive away immediately. I sat in my rental car in the dark parking lot, watching the rain stream down the windshield. 10 minutes later, David stumbled out of the diner alone. Jessica had left him inside, screaming at him as their relationship finally shattered under the weight of their own greed. David stood in the pouring rain, looking utterly lost. His hair was plastered to his forehead, his clothes soaked, his posture completely broken. He looked like the scared 7-year-old boy I had held in my arms 30 years ago in Maine after his father's funeral. He spotted my car and walked over slowly, knocking gently on the driver's side window. I rolled the window down 2 inches. Mom, he sobbed, the heavy rain washing over his face. Please. Jessica left me, the lawyers abandoned us. I have nowhere to go. I have $90 left in my bank account. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I looked at my son. I saw the crushing weight of reality finally breaking through years of arrogance and entitlement. Are you sorry for what you did, David? I asked softly. Or are you just sorry that you ran out of money? I was wrong, he wept, sinking to his knees on the wet asphalt beside my car door. I thought the world owed me everything. I thought you would always be there to sweep up my messes. I destroyed my life. And I destroyed my relationship with the only person who ever truly loved me. I sat in silence for a long time, listening to the thunder rumble over the Arizona peaks. I didn't open the door. I didn't hand him a check. I didn't offer to buy him a hotel room. I accept your apology, David, I said quietly, my voice steady and firm. But forgiveness does not mean a return to the past. I will not pay your debts. I will not save you from the consequences of your choices. You are going to have to rebuild your life from the absolute ground up, dollar by dollar, mistake by mistake. He nodded slowly, tears mixing with the rain on his cheeks. I know. There is an employment shelter in Phoenix, I said, handing a small slip of paper with an address through the window gap. They offer hot meals and entry-level work programs. If you walk there, work hard, and prove to yourself that you can be a man of integrity. Maybe in a few years, we can sit down and have a cup of coffee as mother and son. He took the paper with trembling fingers. Thank you, Mom. Goodbye, David. I rolled up the window, put the car in drive, and pulled out onto Route 66, leaving him standing under the streetlights of Flagstaff. 16 months have passed since that night in Arizona. I live in a small, beautiful coastal house in Savannah, Georgia now. My morning routine consists of watching the sunrise over the salt marshes, drinking fresh, dark roast coffee, and listening to the ocean breeze rustle through the live oaks. My home is peaceful, quiet, and entirely mine. David didn't give up. He took that slip of paper. He went to Phoenix. He took a job sweeping floors at a logistics warehouse. Over the last year and a half, he worked his way up to shift supervisor. He paid off his personal debts bit by bit. He lives in a tiny studio apartment, drives a used bicycle, and manages every penny he earns. Once a month, he sends me a handwritten letter, not asking for money, not complaining about his life. Just telling me about his work, what he learned that week, and asking how my garden is doing in Savannah. Last week, I finally wrote back. I invited him to come to Georgia for Sunday dinner next month. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. The wounds are deep, and trust takes years to rebuild once it's been shattered. But for the first time in his life, my son is becoming a human being I can respect. I saved my own life by setting a boundary that could not be broken. I stopped being a safety net and allowed the world to teach my son the lessons I was too soft to deliver. Loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is locking the door and forcing them to find their own way home. Thank you so much for listening to this story on our channel today. If Evelyn's journey of standing her ground, reclaiming her peace, and teaching a hard lesson in boundaries resonated with you, please take a second to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another intense, suspense-filled story like this one. Leave a comment below letting us know what you would have done in Evelyn's shoes. Until next time, stay strong, protect your peace, and take care.